Welcome back to the Tulsa World Sports Extra Show. I'm your host, Juwan Lee, joined today by columnist Barry Tramel, OSU beat writer Tyler Waldrep, and OU beat writer Mason Young. Before we dive into some OU football and OSU football topics, I want to start with our reactions or our recap of our biggest annual event that we had last Thursday, which is the All World Award Banquet. Mason, I'll start with you. I know me and Barry, this is our first time being there, but Mason, you've been there before. So how was it?
Yeah, well, definitely very different from what I remember it being like in 2021 when I was there as an intern with the Tulsa World. Now being there full time, just a completely different experience. Back then, I was writing the story, kind of the recap of the event for A1 for the next day's paper. And this time just got to kind of relax and hand out a few awards and enjoy the dinner. I thought really good improvisation by you and Barry to I know we had some guest speakers lined up previously that fell through, but you and Barry Lewis kind of cobbled together a panel of some really outstanding high school athletes to kind of talk about their journeys and what's next for them, either continuing high school or moving on to college sports. And just really enjoyed listening to that. You could tell that you guys put a lot of thought and detail into the questions you were asking them, and then their responses to you and Barry Lewis, you could tell that they were really appreciative of the opportunity to share their stories, and they tried to kind of give you their best that they could. So hopefully that was entertaining for everybody in attendance.
Tram?
Yeah, it's my first time at the All World Awards. I thoroughly enjoyed it. I thought it was a high class event. My favorite part was learning about guys and girls I didn't know very much about. When you have schools like Bixby and Jenks and Owasso and Union, highly successful in so many sports, high profile, particularly in football. Yeah, you hear a lot of the names. You read about a lot of the athletes, and they're great kids and great accomplishments. But I enjoyed hearing more about Brady Benham at Sperry. I mean, this is a guy I knew very little about. He ended up being our male athlete of the year. This is a guy who was the quarterback of the football team, state champion in track. And oh, by the way, he's going to Iowa on a wrestling scholarship, a four-time state champion in wrestling. And he's from Sperry there north of Tulsa. I just learning more about guys like that, I just thought was fantastic.
Being a guy from Texas, my year here in Tulsa has been a consistent learning process of getting to know the Oklahoma sports scene. And when I was got a chance to co-host this All World Award banquet with Barry Lewis and Jason Collington, our editor, it really kind of wrapped it into a bow how special this year has been for me. And my girlfriend was at the event, and she said I looked a little bit nervous doing the co-host panel. I was, I definitely was. And when I got a chance to announce some of the awards, I was kind of thinking in my head like, please let me not mess any of these people's names up on this very special night. But I told Patrick Prince and Jason this after the event that I was appreciative that they put trust in me to help co-host such a impactful and large event. Jason said 400 people came out, and it was just a beautiful night. We got to dress up. I got to sit at the table with Tram, with Mason, with our intern Ashton, and it was a beautiful night. Our sports editor Barry Lewis, I said I'm ready for the next one. I'm ready to do more, but I said I know he's not quite excited because he has a tremendous amount of work to put into the event. But it was a special night. So moving on into our first football topic of the podcast, I mean of the show. I apologize there. July 1st, that date is coming right around the corner for OU for their transition into the SEC. So I want to start with Mason with this question. As the Sooners transition to the Southeastern Conference, what would you rather have? Lincoln Riley's best offense or Brent Venables' best defense?
Part of me wants to be just really fanatical with this, less logical, and think, yeah, Lincoln Riley offense, I'll take that because it's high flying, it's exciting. Those were, some really entertaining years of OU football when he was the coordinator and then the head coach calling the plays. But I'm gonna stick with the logical route, what at least to me is logical with defense. And we have the old adage, defense wins championships, and we saw Brent Venables do that twice at Clemson. And that's a very fundamental difference between him and Lincoln Riley on the resumes is the experience and the championship pedigree. And you saw Venables consistently doing that, going up against the likes of LSU and Alabama and these vaunted SEC teams with really good offenses, and you know, Clemson's defense being a key reason why they were able to win those championships in 2016 and 2018. So I would definitely take the defense, and I'm also very excited to, you know, see actually on the field like what Brent Venables' defense that he's building this year for OU looks like.
Yeah, you know what? You're right, Mason. I think you got to go with the Venables defense over the Riley offense. I don't even know which defense at Clemson he claims is his best. I can tell you his best defense at OU was 09, and it was a fabulous defense. They almost beat Texas with a backup quarterback, Landry Jones. Just unbelievable defense. If the Clemson defenses that won the national title are better than that OU, that 09 OU defense, well, then they're fabulous defenses. Brent Venables' defenses have won national championships. Riley's offenses have not. However, man, it would be fun to take the 2018 OU offense to the SEC. You guys remember the Colin Kaepernick Sports Illustrated cover after that playoff game, in which all of a sudden the Packers couldn't tackle him, and the SI cover had the word "holy." ... and everybody knew what was the next word. That would be if the SEC ever laid their eyes on Kyler Murray in 2018. That's how the SEC would react. So I guess if you want to win the most, Venables defense. If you want to have the most fun, Riley's offense.
I can't believe it. I've gone back and forth at least 12 times in the last 2 hours since we brought this question up earlier. But I can't believe it's going to be a clean sweep. I'm going to pick the defense as well. I just think to get through the SEC schedule, you need a defense you can rely on. The offense is flashy, but it just time after time, just these really incredible, dominant Heisman level offenses. At some point you kind of fall off, and it just seems it's easier to rely on a defense to kind of grind these games out. So yeah, I guess I'm going to go with the defense as well. And I spent some time trying to figure out which defense was the best at Clemson, but I think the real answer is there was a huge stretch where it really didn't matter which defense. You were getting the same thing year after year.
Sticking with Brent Venables, Tyler, who do you feel like has the higher expectations this year? Brent Venables in his first year in the SEC, or Mike Gundy now that Texas and OU has departed the Big 12?
Well, just for me personally, looking at the schedules, looking at where both teams finished last year, I think it should be clearly Mike Gundy. Oklahoma State, to me, stands out as the favorite in what should be a very competitive Big 12 race this fall. The odds makers disagree. Oklahoma has Oklahoma is 4 times more likely to make the national championship according to odds makers than Oklahoma State. Their win totals, the over/under for both teams is 7.5. I don't know if that's right for Oklahoma, but I'm shocked it's that low for Oklahoma State. I don't know. Again, I think the national perception would say Venables has higher expectations, but I just can't understand that. For me, I expect a lot more from Mike Gundy's team.
When I think expectations, my mind kind of more so shifts to the word pressure. And I think that the pressure is definitely more on OU and Venables. You know, he just got this contract extension Friday approved by the OU Board of Regents, where he got a modest raise and 2 extra years on his deal. And when that was initially reported, ESPN was saying that it was a significant raise. And there was a complete national media freak out because you had all these people on the national landscape thinking, what is OU doing paying Brent Venables this kind of money when he's only been the coach for 2 seasons, and that first season was really, really rough. Like, he hasn't proven anything yet. And you're going to give him all this money on the doorstep of the SEC instead of after he has proven some things in the league for a couple of years and had some success. Well, it ended up not being that significant of a raise. But it just shows you like how loud the naysayers already are and how ready they already are to call it OU fakers, or to call Brent Venables, a faker, and say that, he's not going to make it as a head coach, or that he still has a lot to learn about what it takes to be a head coach. And I think there is some truth in that, right? I mean, only, last year was only his second year as a head coach. We saw an evolution where he was better with the some of the game management details than he was in his first year as a head coach. But it's definitely, from a pressure standpoint, the pressure is more on OU. It kind of feels like OSU in the new Big 12 that, Tyler pointed out, they may not be as high on the national radar, but they are. It feels like they're kind of playing with house money, because there is somewhat of an expectation of, like, they could be the kings of the new Big 12 if everything fell right. And it just feels a little bit psychologically easier for them, I think, than it does for OU.
Yeah, I actually, Tyler is right. The odds makers, who know what they're doing, by the way, are taking advantage of an ignorant American betting public that don't know that OSU has 18 returning starters and made the Big 12 championship a year ago, and now Oklahoma and Texas are back. So this is prime opportunity for OSU. This is a big year for the Cowboys. Mike Gundy faces a massive rebuilding season in 2025. This is the year when OSU can strike. Most people in this part of the country know it. Everyone in Stillwater knows it. Mason, you're right in that the pressure is always on Brent Venables. If he was coming off a 3-9 season, he would face high expectations. But the playoff is, while maybe hoped for in Norman, and maybe even expected, it's not the typical Sooner season where it's almost a divine right that they're in the playoff hunt. Therefore, I think the expectations for Gundy actually are higher. This is a very strange season, and that's part of it. There's 18 starters returning in such a wide open Big 12.
Sticking with our Bedlam schools, this is kind of a fun question that I came up with, Barry. Which player do you feel will have the most immediate impact if they switch teams? Ollie Gordon on the Oklahoma Sooners, or Jackson Arnold quarterbacking the Oklahoma State Cowboys?
Well, this is an unanswerable question, because the real question becomes, what kind of a quarterback is Jackson Arnold? We don't know. We know what kind of tailback Ollie Gordon is. We think we know that Jackson Arnold's going to be really good, perhaps even a star. If Jackson Arnold is anything like he's purported to be, he's going to be a far better quarterback than Alan Bowman. But he hasn't shown that yet. If Jackson Arnold is everything that people say is, it would be Jackson Arnold, in OSU orange. Otherwise, it might be Ollie Gordon in crimson. We just don't know. The only time we've seen Jackson Arnold basically quarterback a game and a half. The second half at Brigham Young, in which he was fine, he held up. He didn't do a lot of big time stuff, but he directed them to victory in a tight game in Provo. And then in the Alamo Bowl, he threw all the picks and the interceptions. The 5 turnover game, not a good game. So I think until we know more about Jackson Arnold, I think the answer is Ollie Gordon.
If we were talking about specifically swapping them going into this coming season and looking at the roster around them and what we know about that, I would take the gamble on Jackson Arnold at OSU. And the reason being is OSU has all this experience coming back on the offensive line. 7 guys with starting experience, down to the 2 deep. And we don't know right now what OU's offensive line is going to look like at all. We're, in fact, somewhat concerned about that they didn't do enough in the portal to counteract what they lost through the portal and through guys leaving for the NFL from after last season. So for all we know, Jackson Arnold is going to get absolutely clubbed around behind OU's weak offensive line this season in the SEC. But if you put him behind OSU's offensive line, he would have all the time in the world. He would be a force. And I know, having watched Alan Bowman now, we know what Alan Bowman's ceiling is. we're kind of hoping that, right, that Jackson Arnold is going to be in the long run a better quarterback, college quarterback than Alan Bowman. And you also have, and OSU fans are not going to like this. They're not going to want to hear this, but we saw what happened with Chuba Hubbard, the drop off after the workload that he had during his Doak Walker year. And you know, it very well could go the other way for Ollie Gordon this year. He could be fully healthy, great, and goes out and wins the Heisman. That's in the realm of the possible. But I would be worried about if I were to put Ollie Gordon on OU's roster, the attrition from the workload last year, coupled with does he have an offensive line that can actually create holes for them? And so that's why if we were talking about a specific swap for the 2024 season, I would rather have Jackson Arnold as OSU's quarterback.
You know, whether I've covered Alabama, Florida State, and Oklahoma State, you always get the most questions about the new quarterback or the young quarterback that got to play a game, maybe 2 games last year. What's he going to look like this year? Expectations are high. And sometimes those things work out, and sometimes they don't. You know, not every guy that's expected to, you know, shake things up and be this program changer does it. So with that in mind, I think the answer's got to be Ollie Gordon. We don't need Ollie Gordon to break out. We've already seen Ollie Gordon break out. We know what he can do. The only question is how much better can Ollie Gordon get? So for me, I think the answer has to be Ollie Gordon. Yeah, there's definitely a world where, you know, 12 months from now, we look back and, you know, we go, oh, obviously Jackson Arnold was, you know, we'd flip this question, but, you know, that's betting on potential, maybe the top end of the potential. And you don't need Ollie Gordon to improve at all for him to be a game changer for Oklahoma this year. So yeah, I think Ollie Gordon's the answer.
All right, moving on to our rapid fire segment, my favorite segment of the show. Tram, I'll throw this question at you first because you wrote about it. You said the Thunder found their own Derek White. As we see how much Derek White helped the Boston Celtics win their second title in the past 2 decades. Does Alex Caruso, the trade Josh Giddey to Chicago, Alex Caruso to the Thunder, does that make them the early favorites in the Western Conference right now?
Yes, early being this week. You know, everything changes Wednesday. We have the draft. No, who knows who's going to get drafted, but all the trades that could follow out of that. The week after that's free agency. But right now, the Thunder moves ahead, I think, in the tightly bunched West, just because Caruso is a win now type of trade. I think in the totality of their careers, Josh Giddey is probably going to be more productive from this point going forward. But in the year of our Lord 24-25, Caruso is a great fit for the Thunder. I think he gives them an edge right now, but certainly that edge could be overcome between now and training camp.
Mason, in this hypothetical, OU secures a home playoff bid. What would be a more chaotic home atmosphere? Would it be Texas coming to Norman or Oklahoma State?
Well, it's called Bedlam for a reason. And I think that the travel ability for Oklahoma State fans would kind of, in my mind at least, make that more impactful. It's just not as far to come. So on that front of what would be more crazy, I think I would take OSU, but I would rather see Texas. And the reason being is, you know, Red River rivalry every year is played in the Cotton Bowl. We never get to see an OU Texas game in Norman or in Austin at those stadiums and in those venues. And then, you know, once I see that and it actually plays out, then maybe I might change my mind. I might think, okay, based on what I saw today, an OSU crowd, from what I know of Bedlam's past, would not have been this good. Or my point might be proven. It could go either way, but I would rather see Texas just because it's something we've never seen before.
Juwan?
Yeah,
salute to you if you came up with that question. I was this many days old when I realized that Texas could come to Norman in the new playoff. I've been thinking about, hey, Notre Dame in Norman, OSU in Norman, whoever might be in Norman. I never thought of the Longhorns coming for the first time in over 100 years. Salute on the question.
Well, I appreciate that. Sometimes as the host, I do a good job. So I'm I'm glad you enjoyed the question. Tyler, for you, more realistic achievement: Alan Bowman, All Big 12, or Ollie Gordon, Heisman?
I think both could play their way into it, but I'm going to go Ollie Gordon Heisman. When you think about Oklahoma State, nobody's thinking about Alan Bowman right now. Everybody's thinking about Ollie Gordon.
All right, moving on to our party shots. Let's put a bow on a great show today. Barry, I'll start with you. What do you want to leave our audience with for this week?
Well, this is the last week of OU in the Big 12. Everybody's excited about the SEC. Everybody's fired up about what's ahead. Football, softball, baseball, all the great things. It is going to be great. It is going to be glorious. But before the Sooners depart, I want everybody to sit back and appreciate the Big 12 and the OU contributions to the Big 12 and the Big 12's contributions to OU. The Big 12 was fantastic for the Sooners. In the Big 12 era is when OU football was revived under Bob Stoops against great competition. The Big 12 was not a lesser conference in 2000 when the Sooners won the title. They were on the same plane as the SEC, as the Big Ten, as anybody. And Bob Stoops resurrected it. In also, softball became a dynasty in the Big 12. Women's gymnastics became a dynasty in the Big 12. Baseball made the World Series multiple times in the Big 12. Basketball, men's basketball, women's basketball, both went to multiple Final Fours in the Big 12. This league was great to the Sooners. As you're leaving, appreciate the Big 12 Conference.
Well, and as you mentioned, Barry, OU being leaving, it was important for them to go ahead and nail down Brent Venables as their guy for the foreseeable future on Friday at that Regents meeting. But another big piece coming out of that Regents meeting was a raise for Curtis Lofton, who is officially OU's GM. And we don't have time to go in depth right now about what exactly a GM is, a general manager is in college football nowadays, and what Curtis Lofton will be doing. If you want the lowdown on that, you can check it out on TulsaWorld.com. But I'll just say this in very brief. You're going to have someone in Curtis Lofton who, in the very near future, is going to have their hands untied to be able to help Brent Venables with kind of some off-field things in recruiting of shaping the roster and maintaining, working the transfer portal, working the NIL system, and maintaining a championship caliber roster. And so we've seen OU now align themselves with the way that the rest of college football is going. A lot of the other schools have these general manager role types on their support staff. And so an important move for OU to kind of, as I just said, align itself with the way that the rest of college football is going as it heads into the SEC.
Speaking of the future, Oklahoma State's next recruiting class 2025 is currently ranked inside the top 25, just at the edge of those rankings right now. And it's on pace to be second best, maybe the best class Mike Gundy signed in his entire tenure, which, I mean, you just got to imagine how great that could be for the future of the program. If Oklahoma State can start a new era in the Big 12 with a big season and then its best recruiting class in the Mike Gundy era.
This all leads to higher expectations for Mike Gundy than Brent Venables, but we'll conclude that. We'll conclude the show with that. Another great show, guys. I appreciate you. For Barry Tramel, Tyler Waldrep, Mason Young, I've been your host, Juwan Lee. We'll see you guys next week on the Tulsa World Sports Extra Show.